Here at Mothersilluminated, where we help light the pathway through motherhood. I'm your host, Michelle McCartney, here at the co-work of Londonderry. If you're a mom looking for a great place to get some work done away from the house and your crazy kids, definitely look at the co-work of Londonderry at londonderry.cowork.com. Co-work is spelled C-O-W-E-R-C. They have office space, conference rooms, workshops for business owners, podcast rooms, and lots of great benefits for members. And we are here today with Katie. And we're going to kind of talk about an interesting topic, which actually was requested for the show, so I was glad I was able to find somebody to come on and talk about it. But Lyme disease, it looks like you've been struggling with Lyme for 8 years now. So maybe if we could start off kind of talking a little bit about like what Lyme disease is, how do people typically get it, how do you get it, and kind of, go from there with your story with Lyme.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Michelle. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about my favorite topic, which is Lyme disease. So what is Lyme disease is a very loaded question because there are two very different ideas of what Lyme disease is. The mainstream medical community and most doctors are of the opinion that Lyme disease, which is scientifically named Borrelia burgdorferi, after the scientist that discovered it. A lot of medical practitioners believe that you have to have a tick attached for 24 to 48 hours, you have to have a bullseye rash, and then you would have 28 days typically of an antibiotic such as doxycycline, and then you're cured. You're all better. If you continue to have symptoms, they'll diagnose you with what they call Post-Dictal Lyme syndrome. And basically, that's where the disconnect has occurred in my life, at least, where there are other doctors that are considered Lyme literate doctors, and they say, no, that is not post-dictal Lyme syndrome. That's not just the remnants of having had Lyme disease. That is active chronic Lyme disease. And therein lies a huge problem because as a patient, you want to believe that you can trust your doctor when they diagnose you with something and trust that you're getting sound advice and guidance in your medical treatment. But my story is very different because I was a stress-induced case. So Lyme can be dormant inside of you if you think of things like shingles or Epstein-Barr virus. Even though it's a bacteria, it can very much be inside of you and dormant, and something can trigger that. In my case, it was the stress of my wedding day. I know other people that have had car accidents, teenagers that have had sports injuries that resulted in concussions, even moms going into labor. Sometimes they'll actually feel better during their pregnancy, but then after the trauma of having their baby, they'll end up having these series of mysterious symptoms that no one can quite put a label on, and in a lot of cases, it ends up to be chronic Lyme disease.
Wow. Yeah. That's a lot. I mean, so do you know, so if it's stress-induced, that means you must have been exposed to the bacteria at some point.
It does, and that alone is a really difficult thing to figure out because I guess what you have to do is you have to kind of start by looking at the bacteria that we call Lyme disease and say, what is it? We know that it's a helix-shaped spirochete bacteria. Another helix-shaped spirochete bacteria that people are very familiar with is syphilis. We know syphilis can be contracted sexually. There have been a lot of studies and in-depth research done on syphilis because it's been present for a lot longer in terms of the awareness of it. We've only been aware of Lyme since the 70s. But what's really interesting is that they have been able to show in studies that, yes, Lyme spirochetes are found in bodily fluids. Yes, it's a fact they are a spirochete, just as syphilis is, but the concentration of the Lyme spirochetes are a much lower level than you would ever find the syphilis in bodily fluids. But having said that, you can find Lyme in saliva. You can find Lyme in breast milk. You can find Lyme in bodily fluids. that's the reality. So maybe it's not as high a concentration, but the reality is it's still there. And a lot of people believe there's still a risk associated with that. The real question is your immune system strong enough to counteract that pathogen now being introduced into your body?
Yeah.
Or is your immune system so weak that you can't handle it?
Yeah.
So in my case, I had always had eczema. I had always kind of been that sickly kid, but there was nothing ever to really point to say this is exactly why.
Yeah.
And then I had a series of really unfortunate events leading up to my wedding day that caused it to be far more stressful than it ever should have been. And so for me, that was my very first day of flu-like symptoms. We went to San Francisco for our honeymoon, and I just got sicker and sicker. And in my case, I actually was the opposite of how Lyme typically progresses. Oftentimes, people will get physical symptoms, and then it will move into neurological. When the flu-like symptoms disappeared for me, I still held on to that fever. So I had about a 100-degree fever for 6 years.
Wow.
Almost 6 years. It was horrible. But I had only the fever, and then I very slowly started noticing neurological issues. My balance wasn't good. I was dizzy. I was starting to have problems putting sentences together, recalling words. It was really frightening, and as we were going through all of the steps medically to find a diagnosis, we went to a dozen different specialists over the course of about 10 months. Early on, I had a relative that suspected Lyme disease, so we asked for the test one night when we were in the ER. What I didn't know at that time was that oftentimes they'll start with what's called the ELISA test, and that's a very basic, generic kind of a test. If that's flagged as positive, then they'll move on to the more specific test, which is the Western blot. So I never got a Western blot early on. Eventually, after I saw specialist after specialist, they threw different medications at me, like some really frightening last resort seizure medications, but I wasn't having seizures, like really crazy things. At one point, I actually was prescribed steroids, which I now know was a horrible decision to take them because that really allowed the Lyme to thrive. So my symptoms got so much worse. So in my case, it was stress-induced. It was over the course of 10 months that I went from a handful of symptoms to almost 50 symptoms. And I treated aggressively with oral antibiotics. I had injectable antibiotics. I had 1 year with an IV. I had a PICC line. My husband became my nurse. It was a horrible way to start a marriage, but we were really fortunate because around that 10-month mark, we knew to, at that point, seek out a Lyme literate doctor. And that Lyme literate medical doctor looked at my test. He looked at a previous Western blot that I had, and he said, "You have Lyme disease." And we were completely baffled because the CDC guidelines dictates that you have to have 5 bands show up on a Western blot in order to be considered CDC positive. But what they don't tell you is that test was designed for reporting purposes and not for diagnostic purposes. It's used as a diagnostic tool, but if you have 1 band that's the right band, you are Lyme positive. In my case, I had band number 23, which is Lyme specific, but none of my doctors treating me prior to that Lyme literate medical doctor knew that that's what that meant. So they kept searching, even though we actually had the validation in black and white, but no one that I was working with knew that. So once we figured out what I was actually dealing with, I was also diagnosed. They say that ticks are like Mother Nature's dirty needle, and they don't oftentimes carry just one pathogen. So I ended up being ultimately diagnosed with Lyme disease, Bartonella, which is also known as cat scratch fever, and babesiosis, which is actually a parasite that lives inside of your red blood cells and destroys them.
So after getting the diagnosis with your Lyme literate doctor, was he able to better give you medications, or how did that go?
It's such a complicated situation for every patient that goes through this, because you have to understand what you're signing up for. Neurologically, I was really struggling at that point to keep up, and I just wanted the medicine to take so I could get better. And in my mind, it was that basic. I am so thankful for that doctor that diagnosed me, but unfortunately, that was not the right doctor to treat me. He had 2 standard protocols. He was down on Cape Cod, and basically you took one of these 2 sets of medications, and that's all that he could do. And another problem people run into is that there are not enough Lyme literate doctors, regardless of which style you're looking for, because so many have lost their license and they're just under attack. There are literally states where they don't have a single Lyme literate doctor. Like, I have a friend in Arkansas, and they have not one Lyme literate medical doctor in the whole state of Arkansas.
Wow.
So those patients fly to other states just to be able to access a doctor that understands what they're going through with and what they need for treatments.
Yeah. And do you know why they're set? I mean, I know that there's an attack on these Lyme literate doctors as well. I mean, I don't know why, though, because you would think that with Lyme disease, something that is quite prevalent. I mean, I've known multiple people that have had Lyme. You know, it's not like that's something that's super uncommon, and especially here in New Hampshire where, you know, we're all in the woods. Like, you know, it's very common out here. So you would think that there'd be more, you know, of a push in the medical community to find the answers and to help people get past it.
A lot of the doctors that do offer treatments as a Lyme literate medical doctor, they're doctors that are alternative, they're integrative, they're seen as they're holistic, they're different.
Yeah.
And the mainstream medical establishment doesn't like things that are different, that go against the grain.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is really unfortunate, because it's a lot of people need this help, you know. Yeah. And especially where, you know, you went to your doctor initially and they didn't even diagnose you properly. I think that's kind of, you know, that shows you just how incompetent the mainstream medical system is at, you know, even diagnosing Lyme.
And it was so sad because ever since then, I've talked to hundreds of people with Lyme disease, and that's kind of another whole different part of my story, but I've met people from all over the country, all over the world, and it's sad and heartwarming all at once, because we all have the same story of being dehumanized by doctors, being told it's in our heads, being told that we have anxiety issues, that we need to just have a cup of calming tea, go watch a funny movie, do all these other things.
Yeah.
Like, just think happy thoughts and you'll feel well, and it's not that easy.
Yeah.
I've never wanted to be known for being the sick person.
Yeah.
And every person that I've spoken to that has similar stories, none of us wanted this for our life, but I still believe that everything happens for a reason, and if I can use my voice to bring more awareness to this and help other people through the process, that's what I want to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely.
In all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you find this Lyme literate doctor who's able to diagnose you properly.
Yes.
But you said he was not the best at treating you.
Yes.
So how many doctors did you end up going to, and how did you find the one that kind of, I guess, worked the best for you?
I ultimately saw 4 Lyme literate doctors over the course of about 5 years of treatment. The thing with Lyme literate doctors is that, to put it in a very basic manner, and this of course doesn't apply to every single one, but a lot of them fall into the category of either they're looking at immune boosting treatments or they're looking at killing protocols in which they're actually killing the pathogens that are inside of you. And it would be nice if more doctors used a blend of the two, because you do need to kill off some of the pathogens while you're supporting your immune system, supporting your gut. That first doctor was world-renowned. He was actually one of the leading Lyme literate scientists in this whole movement in our country. But it was really interesting to me in hindsight to realize he prescribed me so many antibiotics and never told me to take a probiotic. And to this day, it's been over 9 years now that I first had symptoms. I still have major gut issues because I took antibiotics for so long without probiotics. And they come hand in hand. You really do need them. And it's been shocking to me, having been through this, even seeing so many people that I know and love go for simple things like they got diagnosed with strep throat and their doctor throws a Z-Pack at them but never mentions to take a probiotic. And it's really important even if you have just a few days worth. Last year, I should probably back up. The really tricky thing in my situation is everyone is so complex with their Lyme disease. Everyone has a different combination of pathogens that their body is fighting. They respond to their environments in different way. They have different solutions that we all need. So there is no one cure or one size fits all remedy for everyone. So after I treated for about 5 years very aggressively, we had basically gone through every last dollar that we had. We maxed out our credit cards. We did a home equity loan. It completely devastated us financially. And so I had a long-running joke with my husband that like, oh, if we ever win the lottery, I'm going to go to Germany and I'm going to get cured. And then we literally hit a point where I'm a teacher for the visually impaired, so I work with visually impaired and blind children, and we needed the money. So when you have to, sometimes you're just able to find it in yourself to rise to the occasion and do what you need to do. So it made it really confusing for people because I appeared so functional and I was so self-conscious about how badly I looked and how badly I was presenting at that point. I was literally dragging my left leg behind me. I had severe arthritis. Neurologically, I was a mess. I could barely spit out a straight sentence. But with enough time, I could write a really good report. There were just all these confusing things, and what people didn't see most of all was when I got home, I couldn't do anything. I was completely disabled and exhausted by the time I got home. So my husband did the cooking, the cleaning. He took care of our chihuahuas. He would literally run my tub for me and carry me up the stairs so I could get into the bathtub. But these are the things that you suffer through and no one ever knows except for those people that are in the thick of it with you in your home. And so after about 5 years, I just hit this point where I realized I need a major intervention, and I really felt in my heart for so long that Germany was the answer. I just felt like I need to get there or I'm literally going to die with my fevers and my immense amount of suffering. I had so much pain from head to toe and just everything that I was suffering with. I really didn't think I was going to make it. So one night my sisters supported me and encouraged me, and I set up my own GoFundMe. And so I actually set it up and it was a success. I was so fortunate. And I don't for a single day take that for granted because I know how hard it is for people to get that financial support sometimes. But I also think that to my advantage was the fact that so many people had seen my struggle. For so many people, Lyme disease is an invisible illness and they go through so much suffering without anyone ever knowing. But where I was forcing myself to get out there and work, and I was working in 5 communities at that time, driving from school district to school district, and it was very visible to people that something was very wrong with me. And it had been long enough that clearly I wasn't faking this for attention. Something was seriously very wrong. So in 2017, I went to Germany by myself. We had just enough money to get me there and back. And there they do a treatment that's called hyperthermia. So they heat you up to about 107 degrees. They do it under sedation over the course of about 6 hours. And in a 2-week period, you do that twice. So they got me up to 107.2 degrees Fahrenheit. And the first treatment was amazing. I woke up and my fever was gone. My pain was gone. My muscle spasms were gone. My muscle pain was gone, I should specify. I still remember calling my husband and he was just blown away, like, oh my goodness, your voice, like you can talk, you can say a sentence. Which you're so happy, but at the same time you're like, oh my goodness, this is so bad, to realize how bad it actually was. And then I got a lot better after the second treatment, and I came home and I just wanted to shout it from the rooftops, so I set up a Facebook group to share about my success. The downfall in that was that was a wonderful facility. I credit them entirely for saving my life, but the way that I'm sorry, I'm all over the place.
No,
I have so much I want to share.
This is perfect.
So what's really interesting about that facility is they are a cancer facility. They're a cancer hospital.
Okay.
And so the doctor that runs that hospital in the early 2000s, he had 2 cancer patients that also had Lyme disease. They were using hyperthermia in conjunction with chemotherapy. 2 of the patients came out and reported that their Lyme symptoms were gone.
Yeah.
And so being a good doctor, being curious about like what in the world could have happened, he did his homework, and he ended up discovering that in 1927, the Medical Nobel Prize was awarded to a scientist named Julius Wagner Jauregg. He was an Austrian physician, and he got that award because he was able to prove that using malaria therapy, so it was somewhat unethical looking back. It's nothing they would ever do now. But what he did is he purposely infected soldiers that had syphilis with malaria so that the malaria fevers could kill the helix-shaped spirochete bacteria.
Wow.
Once the malaria wiped out the syphilis, they would administer quinine to eliminate
And
the
treat
malaria.
Because malaria is so much easier to treat.
It wasn't as smooth as it sounds, so unfortunately...
I was going to say 1920s is a little different than now.
Yes.
But
so people did die in that study,
Yeah.
but ultimately they were able to prove that malaria therapy was, in fact, an effective means of killing spirochete-shaped bacterias. So this doctor in Germany, taking on that, tweaked his protocol for the cancer patients and created a Lyme protocol that uses IV antibiotics paired with fever therapy. So you do the hyperthermia in a specialized medical bed that gets you up to temperature, and it very much mimics the effects of the malaria therapy, but in a more safe and controlled manner.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is like so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of other alternative things there. That was my first time experiencing a hydrocolon therapy where they cleanse your colon in ways that you just couldn't imagine.
Right.
But the unfortunate thing in that was that I didn't know enough at the time, and it's just like anything else. You learn as you go, and here I am to share what I've learned.
Yeah.
That clinic in Germany is wonderful. They saved my life, but they don't address co-infections. The doctor there told me, this will make your immune system so strong that it will take care of your other infections, which to a point he was right. But working in so many schools, I ended up realizing I have a severe mold sensitivity. And I was going into a lot of moldy buildings after my treatment, and that was just slowly chipping away at my immune system's ability to protect me. And so after about a year and a half post Germany, I started having symptoms, and I wasn't really sure what was going on. So my doctor, I was seeing an integrative doctor in Waltham, Mass, at a very great practice down there, and she ended up diagnosing me with mold sensitivity and mycotoxin illness along with active babesiosis, which is what I started with, but I thought it was gone. It wasn't really gone, it was just hidden.
So that was the only one that was still there and lingering, and the other ones like Lyme, and then there was the other.
The Bartonella is a big question mark, but I took a lot of medications for that, and different people react differently to the different infections and the different treatments.
Yeah.
So we don't really know if that was resolved when I went to Germany. When you're talking about having 50 symptoms with overlapping symptoms.
Hard to tell what did what. Yeah.
Absolutely. So so that's what led me to Mexico last summer of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic. I once again hopped on a plane by myself, and I went this time to Mexico to a facility that offers the hyperthermia for Lyme, but they have a much better handle on actually treating the other infections. So they use things like hyperbaric oxygen chamber. They had IV artesunate, which is really good for the babesiosis. They have a lot of other modalities that they use to treat the other infections, and that's where Germany fell short because they're only addressing the Lyme, not the other pieces of it. And people always liken Lyme to being like an onion, where when you pull back one stinky layer, you have another.
Yeah.
It's not the Lyme. For everyone, it's different. For me, it was Bartonella and babesiosis and mold sensitivity. Some people have Epstein-Barr virus. Some people have what's called PANS or PANDAS. A lot of kids are beginning to get diagnosed with that. There are so many different possibilities that it's just really tricky to treat the individual because, like I said, there is no one-size-fits-all kind of treatment.
Yeah, and like you said, a lot of them have similar symptoms, so it's like, you know, you have to run all different kinds of tests to figure out exactly what it is that's causing it. Because how can you treat something if it could be one of, 10 different things,
Exactly. And they call Lyme the great imitator, but it's almost unfortunate because if you really look closer, a lot of people that have other things actually have Lyme. Lyme is what triggered other autoimmune issues. I even just ran into the situation where I just a couple of weeks ago received a diagnosis of psoriasis after all this time, which is an autoimmune disease. I didn't even know that. Having had the eczema so long, I thought it was just a similar kind of skin issue, but it's a full-blown autoimmune disease.
Yeah. So, I'm assuming those were caused by the Lyme.
Yes.
When you got that. So now it's not that you have active Lyme anymore, but you have the lingering autoimmune diseases that were caused by Lyme. Is that correct?
Yes. Because even during the height of my Lyme, that's when I developed. Are you familiar with Raynaud's disease?
No, yes. So I've heard of it, but I don't know too much about it.
So it's a horrible condition where your fingers or your toes get so cold that they actually become numb. They'll change colors. Sometimes my fingers will turn yellow or white or purple. There's really no rhyme or reason to it, and there is no great remedy for it.
Yeah. So is that one of the ones that kind of mimics Lyme or can be caused by Lyme?
I've seen a lot of people that have had it arise during their Lyme, but I don't think that there's a conclusive trigger that the medical community attributes to the causation.
Yeah. Okay. I am going to take a quick break real quick because we're going to go into a couple sponsors for the show. So we have Elated Canine. Elated Canine Training and Pet Services LLC is here for your family pet's needs. We work with all ages and breeds. We run day training at our home while you're at work, private lessons at your home, group lessons, and a few other tailor-made services. Please contact Jocelyn at 603-479-7253 or on our website at elatedcanine.com for more information. We can't wait to help both you and your pup find the happy, healthy relationship that you're searching for. AK Property Services is a mom and pop landscaping and hardscaping company. From yard cleanups to 3-season rooms, they can do it all. Currently servicing the seacoast of New Hampshire. You can find them over at akpropertyservice.com. And I do have one more here, which is Kaja Weglar. She's a clinical hypnotherapist offering personalized hypnotherapy programs designed specifically for you with your unique goals in mind. Release low vibration emotions from the past, overcome childhood traumas, and create a life that you love. Become a better mom, wife, and individual, and find your inner bliss through true self-love. Leave the past behind, overcome negative self-talk and unwanted habits, and become empowered. You can reach her at facebook.com/Kaja Weglar's Hypnotherapy, and that's spelled KASIAWEGLARZ Hypnotherapy, or you can give her a call at 603-254-6716. So I know, obviously you were struggling quite a bit, and now, you're struggling a little bit with the autoimmune diseases that are still lingering. At this point, do you have any active infections or no?
It's a really good question, and I hope the answer is no, but I am retesting through the hospital in Mexico in the next week. I ordered that kit, so we'll see. One surprise that I got when I was in Mexico is they actually diagnosed me with another tick-borne illness called Rickettsia, and that's another bacteria. It's a different shape though, and that was kind of one of my regrets of Germany, because the lab that they use in the Mexican hospital is actually a German lab.
Oh, really?
But the hospital I went to in Germany didn't actually use that lab, so now I'll be forever left with this question of, did I have it in 2017 when I went there?
Yeah.
Did I somehow get infected with a different tick that had this? I don't know.
Yeah.
but I'll find
Wow.
out soon enough if I still have any remnants of that.
Yeah.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, you'll have to keep me updated so I can
Yes.
make sure I update everybody who's watching
Yes.
this too. So for people out there who, have Lyme disease and are struggling with it, do you have any good resources that you would recommend, or Lyme literate doctors, or any sort of advice for those people?
Well, my best advice for anyone that has Lyme disease is just do your research. Don't doubt your diagnosis. I know it's so hard when you have medical professionals and family members and friends and basically anyone that you tell. It's really shocking, although I have seen a shift in how people respond to this kind of conversation now versus how they responded to it 8 years ago is very different, which is a wonderful thing, but it's really hard to feel so alone and so ostracized. So just remember you're not alone in this and you need to do what's right for you. So that would be my best advice to anyone struggling with Lyme. And for anyone that is suspicious of, do I have Lyme, I would point them to 2 different resources. So my favorite one is the Burrascano Lyme symptom list. Is this something that you can put a link for?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, send me the link and I can put it in the description.
So the really good thing with this is it's an actual tool that goes through all of the symptoms and you can note your severity and your frequency. And if you have Lyme disease also, it's really important to track your, I know you don't want to think about your symptoms, but you need to track your symptoms. It's something I wish I did better in all of my years being sick, because it's really hard especially when you hit a point where they ask you, where's your pain today? And you say it's a 10. Like, I literally couldn't imagine it being any worse. And then you slowly creep up to a higher number than 10. So then you reset your scale, but it's still important to try to document it. Another one that's really good that they use in the Mexican hospital that I went to, this one is actually developed by a doctor out of New York State, and his name is Dr. Hyman. So he has what's called the MSQ. It's a medical symptom questionnaire, and it looks at your toxicity level. So it gives you a lot of good information. Even if it's not Lyme, this could still point you down the path of finding an integrative doctor or a holistic doctor that can help you to get to the root of your problems.
Okay.
And another really important resource, unfortunately, it's a little bit harder right now because of COVID, because everything has to be harder with COVID.
Yeah.
If you're able to actually collect the tick off of your body, if you find an embedded tick, if you have the tick, that's the best case scenario. You would save the tick with a damp, either cotton ball or a little cotton pad of some sort, a little piece of paper towel, and seal it up in a baggie. And you can actually send that off to a lab. The best one I know of right now is the tickenology.org. For $35, you can get a full tick panel done on that tick.
Wow, okay.
So rather than testing yourself to see if you have antibodies that are reacting, you can just test the tick for the actual bacteria.
Yeah.
So that's always the best route to go if you're able to. But of course, there are other things that can be done and other tests that can be run to help the doctors. Things like the CD57 looks at your inflammation markers. That's a common one a lot of Lyme doctors like to use.
Yeah. Okay. And, through a lot of your research, is there any sort of books or any other resources that you might, that could steer people in the right direction in terms of research? Because it's kind of intimidating when you're looking at a computer screen. How do I find the right information?
It is. It really is. And the blessing and the curse of Lyme is that there are so many treatments available to try. Of course, you have limited time and resources, but there's really an endless amount of options that you can use to treat. And then, of course, just as with anything else, there are people that are out there trying to take advantage of Lyme patients because there's profit to be made in having Lyme patients. So I would certainly be wary of people that are promising unrealistic expectations out of their treatment or their product. I really like Lymedisease.org as a resource. They have, I think that's where I got the Burrascano list from. There are a lot of really great, very legitimate kind of Lyme resources, but I think it's important too that people, if they have it in them, and this is the hard part because you're just so exhausted, it's hard to read sometimes, it's hard to process anything, it's hard to remember anything. Another blessing and curse is social media. It can be a really negative, toxic place where people that are sick and have been sick for years kind of go to these groups, especially on Facebook, and they're desperate and they're unhappy, and it can be a very unhealthy place to be. But on the flip side, if you find a good group, you can find a lot of great resources and information about alternative treatments.
Yeah. And so of the two, the one in Germany and the one in Mexico, it sounds like you would really, if you were to recommend something to somebody, the Mexico one would probably be the one that you'd be...
Absolutely. But as I said, everything happens for a reason. When I went to Germany, I went because there was a huge influx of patients from our area going to Germany. The doctors here that were recommending hyperthermia across the board were specifically recommending this one clinic. And so it was just what everyone knew, and no one had really stepped outside of that bubble.
Yeah.
And I was able to speak with the doctor. I had a really good working relationship with them. I was even at one point helping to provide grants for patients that needed the treatment. But I was able to speak with that doctor last summer when I told him, this is what I'm dealing with. I know you just started offering a co-infection treatment. And he told me himself, he's like, if you can get it, the treatment he was offering was a laser therapy. They use different colors of lasers that do different things to address the co-infections on top of their Lyme program. There is a clinic not far from here in Exeter called the AIM Clinic. They offer the same treatment, and they were actually doing it better than how Germany was doing it.
Really?
They were doing 2 treatments per week across the span of 5 weeks. In Germany, they were tacking it onto their 3-week treatment and just incorporating the lasers into that 3rd week. And the AIM Clinic was actually incorporating things like methylene blue and other medications that Germany was not using. They were even using the German Weber needle, which is a specific kind of needle that puts the laser directly into your vein.
Wow.
I told the doctor that, so now they're using that, but...
Wow, yeah.
So that's when I realized, he told me even, he's like, if you can get it near your house, then it really doesn't justify the travel, especially during a pandemic.
Yeah.
But I needed something more than that, so that's why I kept digging, and that's when I realized Mexico was in fact the best option for me. When I first went to Germany, Mexico, it's called Sanoviv Medical Institute in Rosarito, Mexico. They had just started their Lyme program when I went to Germany in 2017. So in my case, I still have no regrets. I think that was the right choice for me to make.
Yeah.
Because Sanoviv was trying different ways of doing the hyperthermia. They were trying it awake, partially sedated, fully sedated, different kind of
They hadn't perfected the program yet. Yeah.
Exactly. But now they're at a point where they've not only perfected it, but they've surpassed what the German clinic is doing in offering so many other treatment modalities.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is just so cool.
And it was a really amazing place to be, because they literally, at first, you kind of hesitate, like it almost feels like a cult, because they literally give you white clothing to wear. Everyone's wearing the same thing. They don't want you to do your hair or your makeup. They give you this primarily plant-based diet, and to me it was a little too woo-woo at first.
Yeah.
But then once you get over that hump, you realize, like, this is amazing. I can just be here. It's right on the Pacific Ocean, and like just worry about taking care of myself.
Yeah.
I'm wearing the right clothes. I'm comfortable. I'm not having to worry about doing my own laundry. In Germany, I had to literally like drag a trash bag down the street to a laundromat to this German woman that didn't speak any English. And like, there were just a lot of cultural challenges. And at Sanoviv, it's much more like
a resort almost.
A resort, really and truly. It's like Beauty and the Beast. Like, be our guest. Like, you're the queen and whatever you want.
Yeah.
And it was just much easier. And they do speak English, so it just made it all that much easier.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
That just blows my mind. And it's, I have to also say, it's so sad that we have to like go to other countries to get proper treatments. Are those treatments not like recognized in the U.S.? Is that why the U.S. doesn't do them?
Hyperthermia is not FDA approved for the use of Lyme disease. There are clinics now that are popping up offering it, but what's important for people, especially with Lyme disease that are seriously considering it, is what is allowed right now in the U.S. is mild and moderate hyperthermia. There's no difference between doing mild or moderate hyperthermia and just doing a long session in an infrared sauna or doing some kind of other heat treatment. You need to be sedated to get to the highest temperature possible. Your brain cells start dying off around 108, and the Lyme spirochetes die at 106.8. So that's why these hyperthermia facilities try to shoot for about 107, because it's high enough to kill the spirochetes, but it's low enough to not kill off your brain cells.
Yeah.
And in Mexico, they actually don't put your head inside of the chamber, so they can actually get you a little bit hotter without having as much risk to your head.
Yeah.
Whereas in Germany, they actually put your head inside of the chamber.
Wow.
But they also use a lot of other alternative treatments. In Mexico, at Sonaviv, even just the fact that the diet was 100% what every Lyme patient needs. It was dairy-free, gluten-free, and sugar-free. When I left, they gave me a cookbook that I had to print out, but it's all of those kind of recipes that they were giving me while I was there. And I never understood the importance of diet, because when I was sick and I'd hear people say, like, oh, you have to be dairy-free, gluten-free, sugar-free, it's just like, all right, I'll try it. And then I'd try it, and when you're already feeling so horrible, when you feel a minuscule improvement, but it makes you unhappy, you just want to keep eating what makes you happy.
Yeah.
But it's a lot easier to buy into it when you're actually seeing the benefits. So I've stuck with that diet, although it's been interesting even just learning the different reasonings for it. There you have a nutritionist that you see every day, and I actually learned from the nutritionist that I should not be eating gluten, not because I'm gluten sensitive, but because wheat is such a moldy crop. That's why I was having issues.
Oh, because the mold sensitivities.
Yes. And corn as well. So a lot of people that hopped onto the gluten-free train when that became more trendy legitimately noticed health improvements, and it was for a variety of reasons. And a lot of people probably don't even know that piece of it. Like maybe they have a severe mold sensitivity and they were eating a lot of moldy crops, and now by eating different things, they're not.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are just as many other reasons I'm not aware of.
Wow. So what other play did, nutrition have with that? And obviously, I mean, generally speaking, when they say you want to be healthy, it's like nutrition and exercise. Were there any specific exercises that they wanted you to do as well? Because, I mean, I would imagine that the condition you're in with the neurological issues would make that really challenging too.
Honestly, like, I'm not trying to sell Sonaviv, but everything about their facility was amazing. There was a physical assessment. I'm sorry, my brain is on overdrive right now.
That's okay.
They had physical assessment. They had exercise recommendations. They actually had something some people may be aware of. It's called a Chi machine. I ended up buying the original one. It's the Sun Ancon brand. And it's this device that you put your ankles in while you're lying on the floor. So your ankles are elevated above your heart. And the machine just brings your ankles side to side very quickly from the left to the right and back. And it strengthens your heart. It increases your, it does so many different things for you.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
It's been really great for me, because my primary symptom when I went last year was the fact that the babesiosis was literally destroying my red blood cells, and it also interferes with your autonomic nervous system. So my brain was sending a signal to my diaphragm of don't expand anymore, you've got plenty.
Yeah.
So I had these 2 strikes against me where I literally was blue and freezing cold because I wasn't getting enough air. So as I use the Chi machine every day, I use it for 20 minutes. I think they said 15 minutes is equal to an hour of cardio, but it's not a weight loss device. It's literally to strengthen your heart.
The heart and the pumping and the blood cells. It's not. Yeah.
So for me, it's helped with my Raynaud's disease. It's helped with my overall blood oxygenation.
Yeah. Oxygenation.
Oxygenation. Thank you.
And so, since you've had that machine, have you noticed a obvious difference of before the machine and after the machine?
I have, but I also did an FDA trial in the middle of this as well because I just want to get better. I'm 37 years old, and it's taken so much of my life being sick for this many years, and I just want to get better. It doesn't matter what I have to do at this point. I'm well enough to work enough. I'm not working full-time, but I do work half-time, and then I do some private contracting hours. So that makes up for it financially. And so I did an FDA trial of a device called the Tesla Biohealer. They have these very large devices that go under your bed that are very expensive. But what I did the trial for was these small canisters, and it sounds really wacky. They're literally these canisters, and they have natural materials in them like sand and stones. They're sealed. So it literally is a little metal container, but it gives off this energy. So if you read about different types of bioenergies that the earth emits, there's what's called scalar waves. So they figured out a way using Tesla technology to concentrate these scalar waves into these little canisters. They're only charged and good for about a year. But for me, they recommended 2. They're $600 each. So for me, the $100 a month that this is costing, it was a no-brainer because at 4 weeks and then 8 weeks, I noticed significant improvements in my cognitive abilities, my energy levels, just my overall anxiety. Yeah, it's amazing. But I always encourage people, like, just keep looking. Like, what worked for me won't necessarily work for you, but what's important is that you not give up and that you keep trying and fighting this, because I don't want to live in a world where I just have to accept, like, I'm just not ever going to be 100%. I want to get back to where I was before all of this happened.
So at this point, you said it's been about 9 years now. Where are you in terms of, like, your symptoms? I know you said you have some of those autoimmune diseases. Are those still prevalent, or, have they really kicked back enough where you're kind of like, well, it's kind of there, but not really,
It's really hard to say because when I went to Germany, I was in such bad shape for very different reasons of why I needed to go to Mexico. When I was going to Germany, I was feverish and sweaty, and I was just a hot mess. There's no other way to describe it. If you had seen my hunchback, my dragging of my leg, I literally wrote out all of my symptoms here just to touch on a few of them to give you an idea. I had swollen glands, sore throat, joint swelling, unexplained back pain, muscle cramps, muscle weakness, twitching of muscles, confusion, difficulty thinking, problems absorbing new information, word search, name block, forgetfulness, poor attention, disorientation, mood swings, irritability, depression, anxiety, headaches, light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, tinnitus, blurry vision, pain in ears, lightheadedness, stomach pain, nausea, insomnia. It was just, the list goes on and on. And so I was suffering in such a way that it's somewhat traumatizing to think about, and it's really hard to comprehend if you've never been in that situation. But then when I went to Mexico, it was really that I couldn't breathe. And I was cold and I was physically blue all of the time. I couldn't do anything. I would shower and that was basically it. But due to the pandemic, fortunately, I didn't have anywhere to be. I didn't have anything to do. But at the same time, my husband's working from home, and he's cooking and cleaning and doing everything, taking care of our elderly chihuahuas. And it was a horrible feeling of guilt because I'm sitting there saying, oh my gosh, like I've lost my income, I've lost my ability to do anything. I'm
Yeah.
only getting worse and worse. I was seeing a doctor in the Boston area, and my medicines alone were about $4,000 a month.
Oh my gosh.
And the unfortunate thing in that is, as I'm still trying to wrap my head around this psoriasis diagnosis, which in the grand scheme of things, it's a small thing, and now I know what I have, I know what to do to prevent it from getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's just kind of like a punch in the gut, because one of the things that can cause psoriasis is having too many anti-malarial medicines.
Mm.
And the anti-malarials are the treatment for babesiosis.
Yeah.
So as I was spending all of that money trying to get better, I didn't understand that I was inadvertently making myself have this autoimmune disease.
Yeah. And the different treatments that you were getting at the facilities in like Germany and Mexico, are there any side effects that they had warned you about for any of those types of things?
Every treatment has its side effects, but the ones in, more so I'll speak to Sonaviv just because Germany was very basic. They did antibiotics and the heat treatment and very little else. Of course, there are side effects when you treat, and especially if you go to these facilities with full-blown Lyme disease, like really bad symptoms, you're going to have a hard time getting through, because as they're treating you and killing off massive amounts of the pathogens in your body, you're going to run into just as many problems from now you have all of these dead toxins that your body needs to detox.
Yeah.
But that's where they really do excel down in Sonaviv, because they really focus on detoxing your body. So they incorporate the colon hydrotherapy. They do all different types of spa services and massages to get stuff out of you. They do seaweed wraps and special soaks that you can get into. And just there are so many different things. I saw a biological dentist there. I saw a chiropractor that adjusted me, and like I learned so many things about my body that I never knew.
That's awesome. So, so Sonaviv, did your insurance cover any of this at all, or was it
and
all
that
out of
is
pocket?
the greatest tragedy in all of this. That no, they don't. If you have international coverage, you can try. I'm still hopeful somewhat for the Sonaviv treatment to get something back, because the tricky thing with my treatment there is I had a little bit of a curveball right before going. The doctor that I was seeing from Boston had me on antibiotics as a part of my babesiosis treatment. It was almost funny if it wasn't so tragic, but after 5 years of antibiotics, when I went to St. George in Germany, I had systemic candida, so systemic yeast overgrowth.
Yeah.
I had learned to live with it, and it was finally starting to clear until I had to take these medications for the babesiosis. Is a kind of a cruel irony that 4 months of taking one azithromycin a day, and mind you, like at one point I had a PICC line. I was literally pumping IV antibiotics for 8 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
And I never developed C. diff, but 4 months of the azithromycin was just enough to throw my gut into overdrive, and I actually developed C. diff.
So what's C. diff? I've not
C.
heard
diff
about
is
one.
a horrible, horrible thing where you have the bad bacteria overgrow, and it basically causes really bad diarrhea and other abdominal kind of issues. It can be life-threatening.
Yeah.
And in the United States, it's actually the only condition that is approved to have a fecal matter transplant as a treatment. So when I went to Mexico, that was actually one of the treatments I received there. But I had all the questions beforehand, and I did know that I had the assurance that they actually have holistic doctors that are their donors for their fecal matter transplants. So I felt a little more comfortable having it done down there.
Yeah. So, so have you treated that at least? I mean, obviously they did the transplant, but is that completely resolved at this point?
That's completely resolved. That took, it was a solid 6 months of a very strict diet. Things that you typically think of as being good, like fermented foods, are a big no-no when you're bouncing back from C. diff.
Really? I guess because maybe it's too much.
It's too harsh, yes.
Yeah. Wow.
So even things like mustard, pickles.
So now just curious, what did a typical like dinner look like for you?
We were eating so many vegetables when I got home, but it was great. My husband lost weight, and we were both feeling really good. We've definitely gotten more lax with our diet, but we're still trying as much as we can to stick with it. It's just, especially here in New England, it's hard during the winter because we don't have the access to the fresh fruits and vegetables like we do during the summer. We love going to the farmers markets and getting all of the local fresh produce, and they really instilled in me the importance of having the organic foods as well, because I didn't realize how much a role that was playing with the toxins in the traditional crops. Yeah.
So when you guys, are cooking and everything, you've completely changed your diet at this point.
Yes.
What's your day-to-day look like at this point in the game? In terms of upkeep that you're doing to kind of, I'm assuming at this point it's more of immune boosting and trying to help symptoms and trying to kind of get yourself to a point where you're healthy enough where your immune system is not going to crash with these things anymore.
So a normal day for me right now is really just like eggs and maybe avocado for breakfast, a smoothie for lunch, vegetables and some protein, maybe some rice or quinoa at dinner, and just getting creative with snacks, trying to stick with fruit, trying to stick with things that are not processed. It's honestly not as bad as I thought it would be. Yeah. And of course, like, you have to have a treat every now and then, but I think even if it's once a week that you say, I'm going to have a cookie on this day, it's a lot easier to get through those other days if you know you have something waiting for you, rather than having an extremely rigid diet where there is no wiggle room, and then you find that you just ate a whole package of Peeps. Because once they're opened, they're not going to be good. So I think just finding that balance that works for you.
Yeah. And do you guys do all vegan, or do you have animal products in there as well? Or?
My husband loves meat, so we definitely have meat. He eats more of it than I do, but I'm not by any means vegan. We use a lot of coconut oil, though. It was just some of these small changes, like getting off of butter and onto coconut oil, making sure to use rice and quinoa more often than we use pasta. Just some of those small changes, and just getting out of those old habits of reaching for pre-made things.
And then do you still do the chi machine every day?
I try to do the chi machine when I wake up. That's how I start my day. And then oftentimes I'll do yoga sometime during the day, or I'll at least take a bath, some kind of detox bath at night. I had been very into very different types of enemas last year, but then when I got the C. diff, my doctor said that's a hard no moving forward. That's not an option. But I know a lot of people that do really well with different types of enemas, coffee enemas in particular.
And so the C. diff, are you ever going to get to the point where your flora is, have they basically said, okay, in 6 months your gut flora should be back to normal, or?
The tricky part with it is the fact that I had this chronic case of candida already, so it was just a tipping point to get to the C. diff. So I don't really know. My hope is that I can fully get rid of the candida, and it's almost gone, but it's just hanging on by a thread.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and then so I know we had kind of talked a little bit earlier about how you don't have any children yet. And it's not necessarily something that you ever, were planning on doing, and then this destroyed everything. But you have kind of, now you said that you're getting a little older, and so you are starting to think about it. Have you and your husband talked about it? Where are you guys at now, and how has, all of this affected that decision for you?
It's changed everything. It was never my dream to have kids, but I have gained that fulfillment through being a teacher, especially working with students with such specialized needs. I've gotten very close with my students and their families, but it's a really hard thing because as you get older, your stance on things change, and even just having a decision taken away from you changes how you feel about that. So I don't want to say one way or the other, like what I want or what will or won't happen, but it's a really hard thing to have to acknowledge that you're in this situation where for the time being, I can't.
Yeah.
And I would much rather not have kids because I choose not to have kids.
Yeah.
Rather than because I have this gray cloud of a disease that won't go away that's preventing that from happening.
Yeah.
And I think it's a problem that affects a lot of moms. I know a lot of moms that have young kids, and I'm honestly thankful that I don't, because I don't know how they do it. The single moms with the kids was very much why I ended up having that role for a time, giving the grants out for the treatment in Germany, because I actually had helped a mom, and she had her daughter who she was watching suffer so much. She brought her daughter to Germany, and they were so impressed with the results. They came back and they were like, hey, we would love to start up a nonprofit and help other people, particularly moms with kids. And so that's what I did for a few years, helping them through that. And it's just heartbreaking to see, because I feel so badly for the moms and dads that are going through this, because it's hard enough to decide for yourself what is the next right step to take.
Yeah.
And of course, hindsight is always 20/20, and I can now sit here sharing what worked for me, because there were just as many things that didn't work for me. Clearly, the antibiotic route was not the right path for me, even though I tried harder than I ever could have to make it work. I actually have a friend right now. She lives in Florida, and it's been heartbreaking to see what's happened, because she actually has a daughter. Her daughter's 16 years old, so when her daughter was 13, I believe, she brought her to a different clinic in Germany. She wasn't accepted to this one because she was too young. And they ended up going down a similar path as me in my recovery, and this mom just recently brought her daughter to Mexico. She is trying so hard to do what I'm doing for myself. Her goal is keep her daughter alive, get her back to functioning, give her a great quality of life. That's all this mom wants for her daughter. And the state of Florida has actually taken custody of the daughter, and they're accusing the mother of having Munchausen's, and it's just absolutely criminal what's happening to them. The court date they just received is for 2022.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, as a single mom, I can't even imagine. I've spoken to her, so I know to an extent like what she's going through, but I can't begin to put myself in her shoes and truly understand the pain that she's going through. But that's, I think, the worst thing in this, because it's very easy, especially as an adult, to feel like, why me? Why am I going through this? Why do I have to be my own advocate and my own doctor and figure out everything on my own? Even when you have a great Lyme doctor, you still need to be the one that's the most invested in your health, because they have just as many other needy patients, and they're human. They're going to forget things. They're not going to always be on top of things as much as you're going to be when it's in your own best interest. But I can't even imagine being a parent in that situation where you're making those decisions for your child, very well knowing that you're going to be ostracized, kind of like the parents that are against vaccines. Like, they have their reasons, there's science behind it to support it. It's not like these people are crazy, but they're perceived as being crazy by the medical community as a whole. And it's just really sad that this is the state of affairs we're in for people with Lyme and people with other solid, scientifically held beliefs.
And it's really unfortunate, because like you said, most people are just trying to figure out, like, what do I need to do to make this better? You know, like, this didn't work, let's try something else. And you know, then you have like this government agency that sits there and says, well, why are you going to 10 different hospitals this year? You know, like, what's going on? They're all for different things. Like, what are you doing? It's like, you know, you almost want to be like, it's none of your business, you know? Like, that's not your job, government, is not to sit there and oversee my health, you know?
And it's just crazy, because when you're an adult going through this, you don't even think of what privilege you have to be able to choose what doctor, to say, fine, I'm not going to go back to that doctor. They treated me terribly. They berated me and made me feel bad about myself when they don't know what they're doing. But to be put in that situation where you're a parent and now you have to actually answer to people that aren't going to hear you, it's just heartbreaking to see. And I've seen so many parents struggle because hyperthermia is not an option for younger kids. So it's really hard when younger kids have Lyme disease because you really have to more so go the route of the herbal remedies to try to keep things under control. But then that's oftentimes when you'll see kids get diagnosed with PANS or PANDAS, and it's heartbreaking. The whole thing is heartbreaking, and I so badly want to see things change, but it's been a really hard process to be involved in, because as you're trying to get better yourself, carry on with some kind of a living, it's hard to be engaged with the political end of it where it can actually be helped. But that's my end goal, to get there at some point. Where I can be more politically involved in helping to change things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so, if there are any moms out there who are, maybe they're struggling with Lyme disease, or they have a child that's struggling with Lyme disease. I know you said there was a nonprofit that helps with grants. Do you know of any organizations that can help these people financially? Because that tends to be the biggest hurdle in getting proper, diagnoses and getting proper treatment.
It is. The nonprofit that I was working through is no more. So that's not an option, and that was specific to hyperthermia. Unfortunately, this is a huge hurdle that people are struggling to figure out their way over. There are some limited options, especially for kids. There are more resources for kids that need support than for adults. But a lot of them, it's 3 or 4 times a year they take applications, and it's really not enough to get you to that next level. But
okay. Have you thought of opening up your own nonprofit at some point and trying to do something like that? Or
I have so many ideas of what I would like to do. The biggest problem is, how will I fund it? So I need to figure out how I can take that next step. But I do have some ideas up my sleeve. I'm not by any means ready to walk away from the Lyme community. And I think that's one thing that bothered me more than anything, and that's actually why I started the Facebook group initially for the Germany clinic, because I just couldn't believe that I had such astounding results. It's like, why would anyone ever go and get better and just walk away and not tell people this worked for me? And of course, you open yourself up to all sorts of criticisms of people thinking you're seeking attention, you must be making money for participating, and this and that. But when you've lived this, you just want other people to get better and to know the joy that comes from having relief of your symptoms.
And did you have any other advice for anybody who might be struggling with Lyme, or any other resources that might help anybody out?
Not any that I can think of offhand. I would just say that always look for the silver linings. There are so many to be found in every situation. I know it's hard some days, but I've found that, for me at least, having a positive attitude changed everything. And if you can take a moment every day and just have some gratitude for what you can do, for the fact that you were able to wash a dish, or that you put away your glass, like whatever your small achievement is, if you're bedridden, that you were able to hold a conversation with someone for however long, whatever small achievement that it is, be proud of that and recognize that, because as you can hold on to those small victories, you'll notice them starting to pile up, and then it really will give you that boost to get to the next level. One of the hardest things for me going to these more expensive facilities has been that feeling of knowing before someone ever went, like, oh no, it's not going to work for them because they're too negative. And that's not to say that it's in your mind. Like, that's the last message I'm trying to relay, because I heard it from enough people. but you have to recognize the psychological component of it. And if you're so skeptical and you go into any treatment, not a big ticket item treatment, but any treatment, you have to go in really believing this is what's going to fix me.
Yeah.
And if you can go in with that attitude, it will really change everything. Because if you go into any treatment for anything with a prove me wrong, show me that this is going to work for me, you're not going to have good results. No matter what it is in life. And that's been one hard thing for me, because I would never want to tell someone, don't go. I know you have a sour attitude and it's just not going to work. And of course, there are people that it just doesn't work for a variety of reasons. Sometimes the infection is too severe. Sometimes they need more treatments. Sometimes they have other underlying issues that have gone undiagnosed that contribute to their continued illness. And I don't mean to belittle the fact that that is a reality for some people, but it really is a huge component to be able to have a positive attitude and really believe that this happened for a reason. I'm going to find the silver linings. That didn't work, so I'm going to check that box off and move on to something else that I can try. And whether it's just adding a supplement as simple as glutathione to your diet, or doing small things can render wonderful big results.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
You just never know what's going to work. So
And there were a couple different things that I had heard of when it comes to Lyme disease. So have you ever heard of the Wim Hof method?
No.
So the Wim Hof method was actually developed by this Dutch gentleman named Wim Hof. And basically what he did was he created this method, and there's 3 big components to the method. So one of them is like controlled breathing, and then the other one is actually cold therapy, and then the other one is like yoga, practices. And basically what it does is it conditions your body to be able to handle all different kinds of stressors. And it's been, there's been so many different things around it where people have had all different kinds of autoimmune diseases. There's been people who had Lyme disease and came out of it like completely fine. There are people who have like MS, different autoimmune diseases it's supposed to be very good for. Obviously it has the cold therapy, so they always say like check with your doctor, that kind of thing beforehand, because it can be pretty intense for the heart if your heart is not very good. But it's pretty interesting, and so it's an online program, but he does also have like different retreats that he does as well. And actually my husband and I have been doing it just because it helps your body like handle stress. So it's amazing for so many different reasons. But one of the studies that I thought was really interesting was he took these people for I think like 4 weeks or something. The 10-week program. So he had these group of people that did the 10-week program, and by the end of it, they hooked them up to like all these machines and injected them with different bacteria that were supposed to within seconds these people should have been vomiting that kind of thing, and they all were totally fine. And not only did they feel fine, their heart rate didn't increase, their like the temperature didn't increase, everything, like the autonomic nervous system, which is the part that we're not supposed to be able to control, didn't even react to any of this.
That's amazing.
And they were really, it was really impressive. And so they've had a lot of, people that have talked about Lyme disease as being something that, people are having really good results with. Now, again, I'm not a medical professional, and I would recommend everybody talk to a medical professional before trying anything. But it was just something that was interesting. I was wondering if you had heard of it, or, what your initial thoughts of hearing about it might be.
That's interesting to me, because I wonder now, I recently spoke to a man that was using a form of cryotherapy to treat his Lyme. So I wonder if he's actually using that method, or if this is just kind of branching off of that. And I was just looking at my phone because I was just looking into, have you heard of Peak Recovery and Health Center in Nashua?
No.
They offer all different types of therapies, including whole body cryotherapy.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So I've heard of cryotherapy because a friend of mine, her husband has a lot of different issues like transverse myelitis and a bunch of different things. He's basically like almost paralyzed, neck down from the Tdap vaccine actually. And so he's been, trying to deal with this for over a year now. But he has been doing a lot of cryotherapy as well. And I was like, that's interesting, but it's gaining popularity and there's a lot of great benefits with that. And there's a lot of countries, and I just thought this was cool, but there's a lot of countries up in like Norway and, Iceland where it's actually common practice where they leave their infants outside in the winter to nap. Now, of course, they bundle them up and everything so they're not freezing to death. But just 15-minute naps out in the cold. And what they found was that these babies actually have higher levels of brown fat in the body. And that the brown fat is actually, the reason it's brown is because it has higher levels of mitochondria. And the mitochondria is what, that's the powerhouse of the cell, right? So it has the higher levels of mitochondria. And so these babies end up having healthier immune systems and better metabolic processes. And it was just so big. There's so many benefits. And they've found that people who practice some cold water therapy every single day, doesn't necessarily have to be cryotherapy, going into the chambers or anything, but just, taking your hot shower and ending it with 30 seconds of cold water. That's a form of cold therapy. And just doing stuff like that, really it preps the body and it actually will create more levels of brown fat in your brain and in the rest of your body.
That's amazing.
Right?
And I believe it. I'm actually looking as my next medical device purchase at the red light boxes, and those are supposed to stimulate your mitochondria.
Yeah. Wow.
And repair from a mitochondrial level. So
yeah.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah, so definitely look up I'd like to hear what your thoughts are once you kind of get to look into it a little bit. I'll send you some videos.
Okay, fantastic. And like I said, that's the blessing and the curse of Lyme, because there are so many things. Unfortunately, there are a small number of scams, flat outright scams that are just taking advantage of sick and desperate people. But just because something sounds wacky doesn't mean it is.
Yeah.
A lot of wacky things have really saved my life.
Yeah.
I'm all about the woo-woo things now.
Well, I was going to say, we love that over here. So that's really the whole point of this show too, is like you said, there's so many different things out there for everything. And, motherhood is this huge journey because, you're always trying to do what's best, not only for yourself, but for your children. And, there's so many things that happen in life, whether it's yourself or your children. And just having the availability of being able to, look up all these different alternatives and say, okay, this didn't work, but let's try something else. Or, I'm experiencing this and I feel like I'm the only one experiencing this. Whereas Lyme disease is, there's a lot of people that deal with chronic illness and Lyme disease and, have a similar lifestyle to what you've been describing here. And so I think that just being able to have that validation of what I'm going through is real. I'm not crazy. It has been happening.
And that's where the support in the social media groups comes in so wonderfully, because when you're in your house alone and you feel like you're the only one in the world dealing with this, it's so validating to be able to see I have a friend in Scotland. I have a friend in Australia. We're all going through similar things. And I'm so fortunate because through the Facebook group for the hyperthermia treatment, I'm now actually helping to admin one for Sonavive that another patient set up after seeing my German one. I've literally spoken with hundreds of people across the world that have gone for these treatments, and it's just incredible to hear all of the different things that people have tried getting better.
Wow.
And but the whole point of it is alternative treatments do work. It's just a matter of finding the one that's right for you.
Yeah.
And one other little side note is just that for me, I've actually had a lot of problems with chemical sensitivity. So even just going through this has been so enlightening, understanding more about chemicals and the alternatives that you can use for cleaning your house and just basically vinegar for everything.
Yeah.
Like the father
Yeah.
on my the big fat Greek wedding with his
Yeah,
Windex
the
bottle.
Windex, yeah.
Like vinegar for everything. It's so
Yeah.
good for everything, but it's really funny how we have veered so far from the olden days where they use these basic ingredients for everything. It's like, why did we ever stop?
Yeah.
Because these natural, now considered alternative treatments
Right.
are so effective.
Yeah. Which is interesting that they're now considered alternative when for majority of the human, lifespan, they've been the thing.
Mhm.
It's like, how long have we really been using all of these chemicals and everything? It's been such a short amount of time when you look at, the history of mankind. So it's just funny that now all of a sudden everything that we've been doing for forever is considered alternative and wacky and taboo,
That even reminds me of more recently something that I delved into because I kept hearing it from some Lyme friends, Borax Baths.
Yeah.
I never would have thought that could be a positive thing, but then as you research more, you understand, like, oh my gosh, there's something suspicious going on of why they're trying to make you not want to use this when you can actually use it for a lot of really good things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, it cancels out, or at least my understanding is it kind of breaks down like chlorine and fluoride in waters. And so when you're sitting in those bathtubs, you're absorbing those chemicals, which, we won't go into the science of all that, but they're not good for you. And, being able to put borax in it, which is a totally safe substance, and it breaks those down for it, so that way you kind of get more of the pure water, versus the stuff that's heavily contaminated with all these, chemicals that they just put in the water systems.
Although that was one of my two big takeaways from Germany. When I left Germany, I started only drinking filtered water. We have a Berkey filter, and we also use an Epic water filter after that. We double filter our water. And they also got me off of birth control. I had no idea how harmful it is. And having used it for so many years, I had so many hormonal issues, which they don't tell you here. They just encourage you to take it. It's a good thing. It's a smart thing.
It's safe,
and
don't worry.
They don't tell you the intent of it is to alter your hormones.
Oh,
it's to mess up your hormones.
Yes.
So then when you go to another country where they're very against it and they show you your blood work, it's like, oh, I can't believe I've done this to myself. But but it just goes back to everything else that we've kind of talked about today, in that, like, you have to be your own advocate and seek out the right doctors. Because if I had stopped at doctor 10 or 11 or 12, I never would have made it. I would not have gotten through this. So it's just like anything else. You have to trust your gut and keep being your own advocate and keep searching for whatever alternative treatment it is that's right for you.
Yeah, and so what we'll do is we'll make sure we put the links to all the different things that we had talked about today. So those will all be in the description for anybody who's looking for, any sort of answers or help with Lyme. But I think, we're ready to wrap it up. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and thank you so much for being on the show. I encourage everybody to also check out mothersilluminated.podcast.com. That's it's basically where my podcast is hosted out of, but it also has a bunch of other links for my Patreon account, the merchandise account, all those great things on there as well. And the description box will have all the links that you need. Otherwise, I think we're all set here. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Katie.
Thank you for having me, Michelle.